Hello and welcome everybody, my name is Zied and today we are going to see together a Symfony component called the YAML component. This component will allow us to load and dump YAML files, meaning that we will read and write YAML files. And in this tutorial we are going to load a YAML file, this YAML file over here that contains some information about the user, which is first name, last name, addresses. It has 2 addresses, and then a credit card number, and finally a profile picture encoded in base 64. So we are going to, the first step would be to validate this format, whether this format is okay or no for Symfony. We are going to use a Symfony command for that. And then the second step would be to read the content of this file. We are going to change the first name from John to Johnny, and then we are going to write that in the same file to see that the first name has been updated. And finally we are going to take this profile picture and change it from base 64 to an actual picture. And by the way, this is not a real profile picture, it's rather a Symfony logo picture. So we are going to take this base 64 file over here and then save it in a PNG file in our hard drive and check whether the picture is okay or not. So let's get started. Alright, so the first step would be to create a folder for our project. Let's call it YAML component. So mkdir YAML component, and let's cd to our folder, and then we are going to require 2 components, 2 Symfony components, which are the YAML component and the console component. So composer require Symfony YAML and Symfony console. We are going to use the YAML to read and write, as we said, a YAML file, and then the console to lint our file to check whether our file is in the correct format or no. If you are not familiar with the Symfony console component, I have done a video about this particular component and it will be linked in the description below. So we have our project. Let's open this project with PHP Storm and start coding. Alright, so I have my project opened in PHP Storm. So we have the vendor folder that contains the 2 components, as we said, the Symfony console component and Symfony YAML component. Let's create an src folder. Okay, src, and then within we are going to create our new, let's call it test.yaml file that will contain the YAML content that we have already seen over here. So I'm gonna just select all and switch to PHP Storm and paste it over here. So we do have the same content, first name, last name, and 2 addresses, and a profile picture in base 64. Now let's move on to our PHP code. The first step, as we said, is going to be to validate this YAML format. So I'm going to create a new PHP file over here and call it linter.php, which will basically read the content of test.yaml and then validate whether the format is okay or no. And to do so, we are going to require once the current directory and then the vendor autoload to be able to use all the components in the vendor. And then we are going to create a new application and execute lint command over here, which will basically lint the YAML for us. If you are not familiar with what we have seen just now, you should probably look up the video that I have linked in the description below that is speaking about the Symfony commands and how to run them in a standalone mode. So let's test this code over here. To execute php linter.php, and then the linter will take a file name as argument, because if I execute it just like this, it will say to me, please provide the file name or a file content to stdin. So let's execute our command line with the file name, which is test.yaml. And now I have all green saying that all files contain a valid syntax. So just to check whether our linter is working as expected or no, here for example I'm going to do a single space instead of 2 spaces, and if I'm going to validate our code, it will say to us that my test.yaml is not valid. So our linter is working as expected, and we can move on and be sure that we have a valid YAML file. So this is the first step. The second step will be to read the content of this YAML file, and we will do that with the Symfony YAML component. So I'm going to create a new PHP file, and I'm going to call it YAML.php, and within this file I'm going to require, as usual, once the composer auto load, because I'm using the YAML component in a standalone way. And then after requiring the auto load, I'm going to use simply the YAML component. So parsed equals YAML parse file, and then I'm going to give it the file name, which is the current directory, and then test.yaml. Now let's dump what we have parsed. So if I do dump parsed, and I don't have dump, so I need to install that component. Just simply do composer require Symfony var dumper. Yeah, we need to do that not in src folder, so I'm going to go a level higher, so in YAML component folder, and then re-execute that command again, and we should be okay to use the dump, which is actually an enhanced way to dump variables in Symfony. Now let's go back to src and execute our YAML file, php yaml.php, and yeah, we do have a good format, which is an array of first name, John, last name, addresses, 2 addresses, and then the profile picture, which is a very long base64 format. So we have successfully parsed our YAML file. Now we can change John with Johnny, which will be the variable here. Let's split this. So now we can change John with Johnny by simply doing this. Parsed of first name would be equals Johnny instead of John. Let's save this and see if John will transform to Johnny in our test.yaml file. So to save the YAML, the parsed YAML into YAML format, just get that in a variable. So YAML equals YAML dump, and then the parsed value, and then we are going to save this YAML into the same test.yaml file. So file, put contents, and test.yaml, and the YAML variable. Let's test this and see if we are going to have John over here transformed into Johnny. And if we do have that, that means we have successfully loaded, and then we were able to change John to Johnny and save it again. So let's test this out. php yaml.php, and yeah, we don't have the, actually we have first name is case sensitive, so we have added a value over here. Let's remove it and check whether we'll be having this value over here changed rather than adding a new key. So let's test again, and yes, we have Johnny instead of John, which is a good news. Now let's finally transform this base64 value, base64 picture into a real picture. So we are going to do this: file, put contents, let's name it profile.png, and then parsed of profile pic, and let's see if we are going to have a file. Yeah, we have a profile.png, and then when we open it, we see the Symfony logo, meaning that we have achieved our goal and we are good. Thank you for watching this video and see you in next videos to come. As usual, I'm going to ask some questions in the end of this video, and I'm waiting for you to answer in the comments.